Thank you for tuning into the All Funds Investment Podcast. This episode features Steve Horvath, VP of Sales at Fordefi. Steve has 25 plus years of experience in crypto, TradFi, wealth management, and FinTech. He's also worked in enterprise sales for small and large companies such as E-Trade, Pfizer, Morgan Stanley, Curve, CipherTrace, and MasterCard. In this episode, we dive into wallets, custody, on-chain activity, and more. Just a reminder here that nothing said is legal, tax, or investment advice. We're currently filling up our calendar for 2024, so if you're interested in joining us in the show, drop us an email, info@allfunds.io. We'll include all the details below to connect with us and Steve in the description. We hope you enjoy this conversation. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. Get us started with just what is Fordefi? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Fordefi is a second generation MPC solution and security platform. And it's purpose built for DeFi, right? So we wanted to build a wallet solution that had all the same capabilities as prior MPC solutions, but we wanted to iterate it for on-chain capabilities and start to provide a powerful tech stack to make interacting with smart contracts and dApps a lot more easier and more secure for our clients, right? So really at the end of the day, our goal is to provide ubiquitous access to native protocols for our clients with heightened security and a better user experience across those protocols, or I should say a consistent user experience across those protocols.
Could you dive into what is an MPC wallet?
Yeah, so an MPC wallet is a infrastructure wallet that is backed by multi-party computation, right? So you have like qualified custodians, like some of the legacy providers that do cold storage and some of the other stuff. And then you have infrastructure providers that utilize multi-party computation, which is, okay, so full disclosure, I'm a sales guy doing this, right? So I'll go a layer deep on the tech stuff, but uses algorithmic computation to secure the keys from a key management perspective. So the private key is actually never fully formed using multi-party computation. And very simplistically, a general definition of multi-party computation is the best to be described in an example of like you have 5 people in a room and you want to know the average salary amongst all 5 without knowing everybody's salary at the same time. And so the first person relays their salary to the next person. He adds his salary onto that and provides it to the next person all the way down the line. And then the last guy divides it by the 5 and he has the average without knowing everyone's salary at the end of the day. Super simplistic, but that's essentially how it works. And so utilizing the cryptographic algorithm, you can secure those keys and basically split the root key into different key fragments and use key management security protocols to secure those key shares essentially to secure the assets within the platform.
That's great. I'm just curious. I mean, who is your guys' client base at this point? I'm going to imagine more institutionally focused fund managers.
It is. Yeah, so it's an institutional platform focused on B2B, right? So institutional players. So we have a pretty wide breadth of clients and customers, right? From funds that I'm sure that you administer to on your end, but also we've got VCs that are using us, DeFi-focused funds. We've got foundations that are using us. We got a handful of market makers that are using us, and we got a full tech stack so that they can use us on the UI side, and or they can use us programmatically through our APIs. Which most of the market makers do to provide on-chain liquidity and things like that. So we got a broad kind of, breadth of use cases that we have encountered, which really helps from an innovation standpoint and helps us, provide different features and feature sets for these use cases as we come across them.
Got it. And when it comes to, I guess, wallets, take us through wallets. Like what are some of the different types of option for wallets? Tell us about how, maybe MPC wallets, are different than some of the other types of wallets you might see out there.
Yeah, I mean, the types that I run into the most are like multi-sigs, right, that are out there, which are multi-signature wallets, where you have a signer for each transaction, and you can set the threshold of, 2 out of 3 signers or 4 out of 5 signers. The best examples of those are like Safe on EVM, right? And you have MPC wallets, which I just described as well. And then you have obviously cold wallets, which are offline wallets and stored. And then you have hot wallets, which are browser, hot wallets that where typically the keys stored actually in the browser, which is probably, I would say, the least secure. In full disclosure, I have lost money on hot wallets back in 2017. And yeah, not fun. But multi-sig was a great, I think, innovation that came out was Ethereum based, if I remember correctly, 2016, 17, which is a great kind of leap forward as far as security for wallets. And then MPC, I believe, came shortly after that, if not around the same time, to create a way to secure those assets on the institutional side. And now you're seeing actually some retail MPC wallets that are coming out as well. I think Zengo is one of them, but I can't remember exactly. But those are probably the most prominent wallet, infrastructure archetypes that are out there today.
Yeah, and with the MPCs now, are these also multi-sig or is that completely different?
No, it's a single signer. So MPC is a single signer. So you have a single signature per transaction, but you can have a multi-sig setup through the policy engine that is in place on the platform, right? So being a full-featured MPC solution, the technology behind it to secure those private keys is really secure in that, the key shares are held with the client and us, but there are security protocols in place utilizing like a policy engine that's in place. So the client can then write policies or create rules and policies to structure how their organization is going to use the platform. And when they put in those policies in place, and with us, because we're DeFi native, they can set those policies at the smart contract level. They can set rules around on-chain transactions, right? And so that allows them to actually set up different approvals within those policies, so they can have similar structures to like a multi-sig, but it's basically an approval process where they can have 2 out of 4 approvers or 2 out of 3 approvers before it actually gets signed, or actually the transaction gets signed. So those policies have to be met, and those approvers have to approve it before it can actually get signed within that transaction. But it is, once it's signed, it's a single signature after those approvals are met.
Yeah, but that's interesting. So basically, at the top level, the policy framework that's instituted dictates the
Mm-hmm.
operational workflow.
Right, and that's not unique to us, right? That's across
Right.
all MPC providers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, the space is super interesting, right? Like wallet infrastructure, just in general, like not even on the institutional side, but on the retail side as well, right? And just kind of the innovation in the space, and it's definitely something that not only like is interesting to us, but obviously is something that all the way up to regulators and the government has to really think hard about, and kind of how to write policies around it as well, right? Not to open up a whole nother discussion and topic and can of worms, but it's definitely from a technological standpoint. I think it's such a different beast than the existing system that we're used to, that it takes people a bit of time to really dive in and learn how it works.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was just thinking what you were saying. Where the growth of institutional custody has started, and now where it's at from a DeFi perspective has changed quite a bit, right?
Yeah, it's changed a ton, right? I mean, you think about institutional custody just in today's market versus like even 3 or 4 years ago, right? You've got, and we've already kind of touched on some of these, but you've got like qualified custodians, which cater to a certain segment of companies and organizations that need a qualified custodian from a regulation standpoint, right? Thinking more like exchanges and asset managers and asset allocators, things like that. And then you have self-custody infrastructure players like us, where we can provide more capital efficient but still secure ways to deploy capital, on chain. And so, back in the 2015 on, or I would say even later probably, but most of the volume and activity was on centralized exchanges, right? It was probably, the split was probably 95-5 if you want to look at it from a percentage basis, if not, 98-2, because it was just so dominant in Bitcoin and ETH at the time. And if you look at the DeFi ecosystem, I mean, it's just drastically different from what it is today. Back then, right? You had maybe a few dApps that were coming out. In 2017, it was really hard to kind of get on chain. The only way to get on chain was through MetaMask, right? Retail. There wasn't really an
Yeah.
institutional option at that time until like MMI came about, right? And you had Aave, you had Curve Finance, you had MakerDAO, you had Rook. I remember Rook at the time, and which I think was previously MakerDAO. But you had some of these kind of innovative DeFi projects that were starting to really, come out with the first AMMs and start to come out with the first innovative projects to be able to provide liquidity online. And it was so new that most of the institutional adoption was mainly on the centralized exchanges, right? And so providers at that time were really just providing a way to secure those assets and then provide liquidity to those centralized exchanges, which is really like, it's like writing a check, man. Like, you know who it's going to, you know how much it's going to be, just need to write a check, have someone approve it and sign it, and then you send the money to the exchange, and then you do what you need to do, right? Like, and on-chain transactions are a little bit more complex, right? Because interacting with smart contracts is a lot different. And it's not a centralized authority, right? And so you've got rules and protocols you got to follow with these smart contracts. And so now, a couple years later, or even from like 2017 to 2020, you saw a huge push in innovation in DeFi, right? You saw the other, I would say in 2017, and let me know if you agree with me or not, but I would say the main volume was on mainnet, on Ethereum and the DeFi ecosystem there. And that was probably 99% of the activity and volume at that time, right?
Right.
I mean, Solana was like less than $1. Like, it wasn't even built out yet. Like, Polygon, I don't think it was even around yet. Like, but then you come into like 2020, and I remember going through 2018, 2019. I was like, man, is this thing ever going to come back? Like, I'm still
Yeah.
waiting, but we'll see if it comes back, right?
Talk, you might not even
And
need
then
Ethereum.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And so, and from an institutional standpoint, they're going to go where the liquidity is, right? And liquidity at the time was Bitcoin and maybe a little bit of ETH, but mainly Bitcoin. And then in 2020, you start to see a lot more innovation and building on chain. You've seen a lot more dApps, a lot of borrowing and lending starts to become a lot more, I'd say a lot more opportunities in that space. AMMs, tweaking like central order books and trying to see if that fits within, trading on chain and things like that. And you start to see a whole new ecosystem start to pop up, the Solana ecosystem. Now, granted, like a lot of that was, Sam's money per se, but you can't deny that he built the ecosystem there, and the players just left after that, right? But the ecosystem's still there, and I think that's a lot of the reason why we're seeing Solana pump as hard as we did in the last like 4 or 5 months, is because it had an existing ecosystem already built, and so it just needed the kids to come back and play, right? And you're starting to see other ecosystems within L1s and other L2s start to develop, and you see bigger players starting to get into the game as well. You got Coinbase. They came out with Base, which is a layer 2, right? And so you're starting to see more of the innovation and more activity within the DeFi space. And what we're making a bet on is we're making a bet that that is going to continue to grow, and that volume is going to move from centralized exchanges to the DeFi dApp ecosystem. And we want to be the gateway to allow institutions to do that securely, safely, with a great user experience, right? And so we've seen growth with institutional players wanting to take advantage of opportunities on chain and starting to look at those opportunities and arbitrage opportunities for market makers, right? Or opportunities for funds to get maybe better alpha or yield farm or things like that, where previously it was a big risk, right? You've got to deal with smart contract risk. You got to deal with whatever wallet extension you're dealing with, and you don't even know what it says on the wallet extension. You're just hoping that address kind of matches the address that you think it's going to match, and you're like, oh man. And then, yeah, exactly. And then you do the classic, like, I'll do the first 4, the middle 4, and the last 4, right? And if those match, I think I'm good to go. And so, like, we wanted to provide a little bit more security than that, for people to be able to do that. And as the DeFi ecosystem continues to innovate and continues to mature, we want to be able to provide that gateway for clients to be able to interact, because we think that's where liquidity is going to move, and institutions follow liquidity.
Yeah. Where are we at in the L1, L2 race? Are those still taking place? Are you guys seeing action on a lot of chains outside of Ethereum?
Yeah, so I have an opinion. It's just an opinion. And full disclosure, like, I'm a big fan of Solana, and I have been since the fees on Ethereum in 2010 and 2020 kind of drove me away. And I think that'll always be an issue for Ethereum, at least for the foreseeable future, right? But to go back to your question, the L1s and L2 debate, look, like, why would I bridge to an L2 when I can go to a layer 1 like a Solana or something else with lower fees? I don't have to bridge, which bridging in my opinion is like ACHing. It's a pain in the ass. I got to wait for, a day or two. Like, okay, maybe it's like 8 hours, but it feels like a day or two in crypto, right? And risk, something happening in that bridging. I remember first doing Wormhole like 3 years ago, and I was like, oh man, like, literally this is a wormhole. I might not see these funds at the end of the rainbow.
Could you explain real quick what a bridge
Oh,
is
sorry.
for those that are listening that are not familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bridge is a dApp or smart contract that allows you to move assets across native protocols. So like moving from Ethereum to Solana, right? And Wormhole was a bridge where you could deposit your Ethereum into the Wormhole bridge, and essentially on the back end, what they were doing is wrapping that Ethereum and then minting the Ethereum equivalent or ERC20 equivalent on the Solana ecosystem. So then you can participate in that ecosystem, right? So essentially, if you think about it as two chains, and then you have a bridge between the two, that would allow you to cross over to the next chain and participate in whatever you wanted to do on that chain. Sales guy explanation. Yeah.
And
That's great.
yeah, so you're saying the bridge is a pain in the butt, so it's better. And you guys are seeing
It
more
is.
activity on some of these layer ones that are a little bit more
Yeah,
efficient.
look, yeah, I would say we're seeing more activity more recently on these L1s that are more efficient, but we're still seeing the bulk of it is still on EVM, right? I think people are just comfortable with EVM. They know how EVM works. You can use the similar wallet extension across EVM, so there's familiarity there, and there's a little bit of like security there, right? I think some of the L1s that are up and coming, they still have a lot to prove, and they still have some things to kind of shake off from the past, right? But I think that's happening. I think what you'll start to see too is I'm in coming from the wealth management space and kind of the fintech space. I'm in no way a purist of any L1 or L2, and I think there's a place for each one if they can prove a use case and they can cater to a segment of use cases and clients that they can do, right. So I think that there will be a select few L1s that will distance themselves from the rest for specific use cases. And L2s, I think, will stick around, but they really need to solve the bridging problem. They really need to solve an easier way to get on, right? Uh, because for someone, if you pick someone off the street and you ask them to go on and buy Matic on Polygon and you don't give them any help, take a guess how long it would take. Like I would at least
Hours.
an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so we need to get that down to like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, right? And make it easy and simple. And really the fact of bridging and a lot of the wallet connectivity, I think, should be on the back end, right? People shouldn't even see that.
Yeah,
And I think that's where we're getting to, but it's going to take some time, right?
Yeah.
yeah, that makes
So,
sense. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'm curious too, just on the staking side, staking, on chain or staking in
Mm-hmm.
general. What you're seeing as far as trends happening, where things are going?
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking about that because all staking is done on chain, so I don't know why
Yeah,
I wrote that,
exactly.
but
I say that some people and people they try to differentiate. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, all staking is done on chain, but for us, for institutional staking, right, you've got multiple ways for institutions to stake, either directly with a dApp on chain, and they can stake with a smart contract or through a validator, or you can go through a staking provider, which provides services where you can stake with them at higher amounts or significant volume. And for us, like we partner with a lot of great staking providers for our clients so they can stake their assets when they want to. But we're maintaining kind of an agnostic view and really trying to stick to a strategy of, hey, look, we want to provide options for our clients within these different ecosystems, and that includes staking. So we're more than willing to work with staking providers and partner with staking providers to provide options for our clients and give them the ability to, stake with them, write policies down to their smart contracts, do what they need to do. But we feel that the best experience is to let the client choose which provider they want to do, where they want to stake, and utilize our extension to do that directly on the dApp rather than within our solution.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Talk about providers. So why would somebody choose to use a staking provider as opposed to doing it themselves?
You got me, man. I don't know. No,
Choose
I'm
your
just
own
kidding.
adventure. Is that
Yeah, choose your own adventure. Yeah, totally. It's a great question. So as a retail, my preference is to stake directly on the dApp. I personally, for my own personal stuff, I use a ledger. I think it works fine. Sometimes I use ledger validator. I'll use some of these other provider validators, depending on the commission rate, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, they're all kind of the same, at least from the experience of a retail user. You know, you're going to stake your stuff and you're going to get your yield, and then you just kind of, let it go for whatever. I think from an institutional standpoint, there is a level of security that you got to take into account when staking with a provider, right? So there's different, I think, criteria that has to be met from an institutional standpoint to feel comfortable with the staking provider versus maybe going on chain and staking through a DApp where you have smart contract risk and things like that. So I think there is a difference there for institutional players, and the fact that they can use someone like a Fordefi to secure those assets and do it seamlessly makes it very attractive for them, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Back to the CeFi, DeFi narrative of volume shifting. Like at the time, you guys would actually have data on that, right? And actually be able to tell or see some of what that's going on. So that would be really interesting to see, actually, like if there's a trend, right, over the last couple of years on that.
Obviously, back in, 2021, we were seeing really high DEX volumes. Definitely diminished a lot over the last 2 years, but we're seeing another uptick.
Yeah. Isn't it ironic though that it's the centralized exchange that are blowing up DeFi? Right.
Yeah, Coinbase, you gotta love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Coinbase. I'm just talking about like FTX thing, right? It's an exchange that went down, and it was obviously outright fraud, but it just destroyed DeFi. Like the volumes and activity just like sucked it up like a vacuum, for the better part of the year, and then and so I think the more that we get back to just kind of core fundamental elements of an industry and getting back to innovation in the space, the more we can kind of, I don't know, maybe not necessarily separate the two, but delineate between the exchanges and accounts on exchanges versus not having accounts on exchanges like in traditional finance. I mean, no one has an account at NASDAQ. You have an account at Charles Schwab, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then delineating that from like DeFi, where you can have your own self-custody account and interact with smart contracts and go on chain and interact with these different dApps, is a lot different and shouldn't be affected by what happens with exchanges. But because of how small we are, I think that's really what sucked it all out, as far as like a market cap standpoint.
I think as the user experience continues to get easier, like we kind of touched on earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's going to be the biggest piece. Yeah. And there's some really cool stuff happening.
Yeah,
on the user experience
things
side.
are maturing. More transparency, more support.
Yeah,
for different opportunities there. I always think of it just back to the .com bubble and things that happen. The system kind of corrects itself, right? The pets.com of the world have to go away. Things like that have to kind of right the ship, if you will. And different things like what the internet was built on. Nobody cares what browser you use, whether Chrome, Firefox, it's all built on the same rails, right? We don't talk about so I think we have to get to that point. You talk about bridging and things like that. Those things need to be kind of consolidated and make things easier for people to improve the user experience, as we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, a lot of that, the user experience, I think a lot of it comes down to how people interact with websites, right? And the whole, I know people throw around like the concept of Web3 and whatnot, but it's actually is a very innovative process and phase of the internet, right? And being able to not only just view and gather information online, but now being able to interact and extract value from the internet is a completely new thing for people. And the speed of adoption, and the S curve of adoption for this, I think is going to be pretty fast once it starts to catch on, just like the internet was, and just like people buying, pets.com or, at the time, Instacart or whatever it was, right? That drove it up so high. Not realizing that like getting food delivered to your home, they were doing that in like the 1920s, like because they had to, right? But now you can just order online and people will deliver it to your house,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's be able to monetize your own data, in a Web3 environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge concept, right? That everyone will be able to do.
Dude, monetize your own data, but also start to maybe implement back in some privacy features that we lost in the traditional system, right? Or that we gave up, I should say, in the traditional system, right? And that's actually a pretty big one for me because consumer data rights is really important. I think a lot of people they take it for granted, because they want the experience, so they want to get the value from whatever app they're using, not realizing that they're giving up so much privacy in doing so. And unfortunately, I think that ship sailed, at least for a lot of privacy, for personal privacy. But I think there's still a way for us through zero knowledge proofs and other innovative things that are happening in this space to actually claw back some of those financial privacy aspects that people don't have anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point you brought up with zero knowledge and kind of things that are, being able to put guardrails in place, going forward.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I'm actually really excited about zero knowledge proofs and kind of the stuff that's happening in that space. Like I don't intimately know like a lot of the technical details, but just coming from like the fintech space, like it's similar to providing attributes for like lending scenarios versus providing actual personal data for that, right? And just in attributes like a yes or no versus like here's my birthday, here's my address, here's my phone number, like come and get me, kind of scenario.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm also curious, verifying smart contracts. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how it's done? What does it even mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, one of the biggest differentiators for us in the space is that we wanted to heighten the security of those on-chain transactions. And a piece of that is making sure that we're interacting with the right smart contracts when our clients interact in certain dApps, right? So, what we're doing is we are verifying smart contracts that we have a database of. And we're making sure that we know the smart contracts for each and every dApp within the ecosystem so that we can verify those contracts during the course of the transaction and help mitigate things like man-in-the-middle attacks, injections of non-smart contract addresses into the flow, or even unknown smart contracts into the flow, right? So think about scenarios in the past like the Badger DAO type of hack, right? Where it was an exploit of the allowance feature in the smart contract. And so if you gave them unlimited allowance, they exploited that particular bug and they would drain your wallet, right? And there's other instances where I can't remember the individual, but it was a pretty high dollar amount on MetaMask where a non-smart contract address was injected into the flow and the dude lost like 3 million sending it to the wrong address, right? Not realizing that it was not the intended address that he wanted to go for. Like going back to the whole like first pour, middle pour, last pour, right? So we want to provide heightened security for those on-chain transactions so we can help mitigate those types of scenarios and provide better security for on-chain transactions and verifying those smart contracts. And we're actually verifying contract addresses of the assets involved in the trade. So we know those are the correct token contract addresses, goes a long way in helping that out.
That's cool.
That's
So is
great.
it kind of like I want to do a swap here? I'm selecting what it is, and then I'm dropping a smart contract. You're kind of verifying that to make sure it's lines up with what you guys have.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you want to go do a swap on Uniswap, there's a couple of things we wanted to do with the extension. So we actually built our own homegrown extension from the ground up. And the reason why we did that is because we want to have full control over the user experience and provide that consistent user experience across native protocols and across chain. But we also wanted to provide contextual, human readable data so people knew exactly what was happening within the transaction, right? Like, so it's a swap. You're on Uniswap. That's the contract that belongs to Uniswap because we verified it. You can see the little check mark that we put that we've actually verified that as well. And you can see the assets that are involved in the swap and that we verified those contract addresses in that, right? We do transaction simulations. So everything is human readable and you can actually have context, not only for the people who are signing it, but also for the people who are approving it as well. So people can be on the road, they can be in different geographic locations and they'll get that full context, not only with the extension, but also within the mobile app that we have as well. So we wanted to make sure that was clear and transparent. And people had the full understanding of what was happening on chain.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, just what you explained, which is great, by the way, just kind of mitigating that risk and going through the process with the user. Do you feel like the
Yeah.
institutional players that you work with are pretty educated on this process, or is it it's an ongoing education by you guys to kind of provide what this looks like from an operational workflow, the monitoring of the smart contracts, how you guys handle
Yeah.
things? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say 95% of the folks that we talk to are crypto natives in the space and have been in the space for some time. And they've either used MetaMask or MMI or different solutions, right, for DeFi transactions. And so they're pretty familiar with the interactions and some of the uh, misgivings of the past. And so the folks, I would say, as we start to approach more traditional institutions and more institutions that maybe cross over between traditional finance and crypto, there would be a lot more education involved in that as well. But I will say, before this, I worked at MasterCard running partnerships for them on the digital asset side. And I will say there are components within those traditional institutions that are getting up to speed pretty darn fast. And so you do have folks in there that do understand DeFi and do understand the mechanics of it. So, my hope is that it'll be a pretty short ramp for those guys that are coming into the space.
Yeah, that's great news. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Cool.
hopefully they can come in sooner rather than later.
Yes, that's right.
We're all waiting. We've been waiting.
Yeah.
Anything else in your end, Skylar?
No, this has been great. I appreciate the time, Steve, as far as kind of going through the process and giving us an update on where things are going related to DeFi and kind of what you're working on there. That's awesome.
Just to wrap it up, Steve, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about Fordefi?
Yeah, you can go to our website, obviously, fordefi.com. You can reach me at steve@fordefi.com and or Telegram, which is Steve Fordefi, all one word. Try to keep it pretty easy there. So, but yeah, if you have any questions, have any inquiries, don't be afraid to give me a shout.
Absolutely. Include all that in the show notes. Thanks so much, Steve.
Awesome.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Thanks again for watching. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more information like this. And once again, we're filling up our calendar for 2024. So if you're interested in joining us in the show, drop us an email, info@allfunds.io. Check out everything in the description below to connect with us and Steve.